Let's get started. This guy here is somebody we met through this incredible circumstance on a trip, and I can't wait for him to tell his side of the story before we tell ours. Uh, Folks, please make welcome in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Mr. Vijit Malik. Hi,
Well, thank
Vijit.
you so much. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me on this show. And as you alluded to the fact that we met under strange circumstances, strange and wonderful circumstances, I might say. Uh, the way it happened for me was that I was driving home one evening, and a friend of mine called and said, well, and he knew that I was into bluegrass. And he said, you might want to stop over at the Global Village because there's a bluegrass band playing there this evening on the main stage. And I looked, I said, Ryan, there's no way, bluegrass band, Global Village, Dubai, nobody knows, what bluegrass is here. And he said, no, I had some acts on the main stage and I was told to move them because the US Embassy wanted these guys, to play in this time slot. And so I landed up there, and I think, there were, as we talked about, probably about 10 people in the crowd, few Emiratis, I guess a couple of Saudis, and me. And they were, clapping very politely, but I could see that they didn't really know the music. And so at one point, I kind of yelled out something, said, can you play Pig in a Pen or something like that? And, I saw you almost do a backflip. And then we met after after the show, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic.
Yeah, my version of that story is, I mean, that they were playing in Global Village, and Global Village is this huge amusement park almost that's like internationally themed. So every country has their own building in this massive, massive place, and including the United States, including India. I'm not sure if there was a North Korea, but almost every country in the world had a place where you could go and get food from that country, get clothing from that country. It was a bizarre place to be playing a show, and we played, and about halfway through the set, and you're right, there were. I have pictures, and I'm going to show these actually. There were more than 10, but it was a surreal experience. I'm going to pop these up here. Folks should be able to see this right now. Uh, this is a picture from that show, and I want to point out that right in front of the stage in a red turban is Vijit, and that was where he was when he yelled out "Pig in a Pen." And then you said play some Olden in the Way. I remember that, and I was just like,
That's right.
are you kidding me? What is going on here? We've been in the Middle East for 2 weeks, and the last thing anybody is going to say to us is something like play some traditional bluegrass. And I remember we played maybe hobo song. We played something that we hadn't played in years, and I remember it not being very good because we hadn't played it in a while. But it didn't matter. And I ran out and found you afterwards, and I remember running as fast as I could. The stage was huge. It took me a while to run around, and there was your bright red turban, and we had this wonderful talk, and we've stayed connected since then. It turns out you're a fantastic musician. You have your own band in Dubai, and I think it'd be really cool. I think a lot of people tuning in will love your shirt. Um, tell us Tell us about your connection to American music and more specifically jam band and bluegrass music.
Sure. So, I grew up in India and went, we did my basic education, went to high school in India. And then after that, ended up for my undergraduate education in Ohio, of all places. And that too in a small town called New Concord, Ohio, where there are probably about 5,000 folk in total, of which about 1,500 were college students. So it's a really small town. Ended up going to school there. Met some great guys, and two people in particular that I'd like to sort of shout out to. Both fantastic musicians. My roommate through college, a guy called Chris French, who's a fabulous musician, and then the other guy was Dave Ruck. And Dave again is just a brilliant musician with who plays all kinds of music. Dave was playing in a Grateful Dead cover band at the time, but he's a bluegrass expert. Plays all kinds of music, and so he introduced me to a lot of this stuff. Surprisingly, he never kind of pushed the Dead on me, but rather than the Dead, he introduced me to Crosby, Stills and Nash, Neil Young, Peter, Paul and Mary, and all this great stuff, Little Feat. And so that's where, I sort of got interested in this kind of music. And then I also happened to incidentally hear the Dead. Somebody gave me a bootleg of a 1984 show. And, I heard it, and for some strange reason, I really liked the music. And so, began listening to a lot of the Dead. I was fortunate to see the band a couple of times before Jerry went. This was I saw them in 1989, and we did the whole Deadhead thing. We camped out to get tickets overnight. We did the parking lot scene, and it was just so much fun. It was more than just the band, and they used to say that it's the audience that plays the band, and in so many ways that was so true.
I'll never forget that you told me backstage after that show that one of your greatest regrets in life was not going on tour with the Grateful Dead.
Yes, well, I went for my first Grateful Dead show in Pittsburgh with a college professor of mine, and so on the way there, I suddenly noticed that he kind of went quite silent on me, and so I said, Mr. Wilson, what's the deal? He said, well, I just hope you have a serious case of amnesia when you get back to college, because Deadheads do what they do. And so anyway, he said, and drop the Mr. Wilson, that's Joe, so we had a great time in Pittsburgh, and at that point he told me, he said, look, what are you planning to do after you graduate? And I said, well, I look for a job, and if not, go back to India and probably get a further degree. And so he suggested, he said, why don't you just get this out of your system, go follow them for a year. And it would have been a good thing, but it didn't happen.
Well, you've still carried them with you in your heart forever, it sounds like.
Well, apart from the Dead, I just fascinated by the music of Jerry Garcia. And again, he had so many facets to him, with his his origins in bluegrass music again. He was a fantastic banjo player, as you would know, played the pedal steel, played all kinds of instruments. And for him, it just seemed to me that he lived and breathed music. And he was such, he was so modest, all the time. The Deadheads just adored him. But for him, it was not about, being the leader or a cult figure or anything like that. He was just another member of the band, and, he just wanted to play his music, and that was all it was all about.
Yeah.
And I just find that, with him, there was so much spontaneity, so much improvisation in what he did. And that kind of draws back to, my sort of musical beginnings in sort of Hindustani classical music, which I learned in school. Which again, although is when you play within a rag form, there's a certain discipline that you follow in terms of the notes that you would play and the note patterns that you would play. But yet within that, there's a lot of room for improvisation, and I just find that there were some similarities in that.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Hey, before we move on, can you turn your gain up a little bit?
Sure.
I think you're a little quieter than me.
Okay, maybe if I move the mic a little closer, would that be
better? That sounds better too, for sure. Vijit has his PA hooked up through the computer, which is why he sounds great. It's sound over the internet is difficult, but when you know what you're doing with gear, you can make it sound better. And props to you for being as prepared as you possibly could be for this. I want you to share some music, and I'm going to let you choose. I know we have a music video I want to share, but I'd love for you to play a little bit of something if you
sure.
whatever inspires you to play.
So Ben, I think again, in growing up in India, in school, I went to a boarding school and I was learning Hindustani classical music, as I said, and I guess that was something that was, I guess it comes from my mother, you know, who was very interested, very keen on Hindustani classical music. And I used to accompany her to some of these shows back home in Calcutta. But apart from that, you know, whilst learning Hindustani classical, I was also fortunate to be a part of a choir that sang Christmas carols in 4-part harmony. You know, and I guess that sort of inculcated in me, you know, that sort of joy of harmonies, you know, and harmonization and vocal harmonies. So, you know, I started listening to Simon and Garfunkel, again, one of the greatest duos, you know, in this kind of music. So if you don't mind, I'd probably start with a song that I've sung forever. But it's been one of my favorite songs of all time. So maybe I can sing a little bit of that.
Amazing.
So this is The Boxer by Simon Garfunkel. Well, I'm just a poor boy, though my story's seldom told. I've squandered my resistance for a pocket full of mumbles, such are promises. All lies and jest, still a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. When I left my home and my family, I was no more than a boy, in the company of strangers, in the quiet of a railway station, running scared, laying low, seeking out the poorer quarters where the ragged people go, looking for the places only they would know. Lie, 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 lie. Asking only workman's wages, I've come looking for a job, but I get no offer. Just to come on from the whores on 7th Avenue. I do declare, there were times when I was so lonesome I took some comfort there. La 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 la, la la la. Well, I'm laying out in my winter clothes and wishing I was gone, going home, where the New York City winters aren't bleeding me into going home. In the clearing stands a boxer and a fighter by his trade, and he carries the reminders of every glove that laid him down or kept him till he cried out in his anger and his shame, I am leaving, but the fighter still remains. Lie, 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 lie. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
We have some bravos, people are commenting. I want to real quickly point out who all's in this stream, which is pretty cool. Just here on Zoom, we've got people from Wilmette, Illinois. We've got people saying this man is amazing. Someone says great T-shirt. There's someone in here from London. Also somebody from from Kenya. Really enjoying this performance of the boxer. Love from Nairobi, Kenya. Wamagunda Mwangi from Nairobi. So just so you know, you're a hit worldwide, Vijit.
Fabulous. I suspect the one from London is my sister and her husband. But.
Could be. Oh, there's somebody from Paris too. Very cool. Drew Schmidt in Paris. Anyways, Vijit, can you tell me, us a little bit about your, you've told me you're Sikh. You follow Sikhism, right?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So, the turban is a dead giveaway. Yes, I am Sikh. We have, we're a young religion out of India, out of the state of Punjab. In India, we are about 20 million odd, so makes us about 2% of India's population, so we're not that big. The religion, as I said, was fairly young. Came about in the late 1400s, and it's a monotheistic religion. We believe in one God, and really, there's not. It's a fairly simple religion. It's all about living being a good person, humility, courage, and all that kind of thing. Now, I know we've talked about this in the past, Ben, and the significance of the turban. Really, if you want me to touch on that, I can probably just touch on that a little bit. So, at the time that the religion came about in India, the primary big religions in India at the time were Hinduism and Islam. And I guess our founder, Guru Nanak, his basic teachings were that all men are equal, and at that time, as you know, the caste system was very prevalent in India. So there were various gurus. We consider them our prophets. They were not God, but they were prophets who taught the religion. And the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, in the 1600s. Banded us into what he called the Khalsa and gave us, the basic symbols of the religion, if you will. And the turban, long hair is one of the symbols. And the reason for that was that at the time, again, we were, our gurus were being persecuted by the rulers at the time, the Mughals in India. So we had to take up arms. So whilst one of the symbols of our religion is the sword, I think for Guru Gobind Singh, it was very important that we were primarily seen as men of God, and at that time, long hair, unshorn hair was considered to be, people who were essentially God-fearing people. Now, the turban, part of it is also, to sort of keep the appearance neat, but other than that as well, the turban has always been associated with a symbol of status in India. So with every Sikh wearing the turban, the idea was that nobody is different, everybody is the same, and there's nobody is higher or lower than anyone else.
Oh wow!
So I guess that's one of the reasons for the turban.
I've never seen you without one on. Do you ever take it off?
Oh yes, I do. At home I don't wear one, but typically yes, when you go out, in public, you would wear the turban.
Huh.
And so, when I perform with the band as well, it's always been something that I've, sort of insisted on, that I will go there, play on stage with my full turban. And sometimes people find that a bit fascinating to see somebody with a turban playing, folk music, American folk music. But
yeah,
that's how it is.
I got to imagine that when were you wearing a turban when you went to those Grateful Dead shows that you went to?
The first one, yes. And the second one, we went from a fraternity party. So, we, needless to say, we were quite merry. And so, for that one, I kind of let my hair down. And I must say it was an experience.
That's cool. There's some really good questions coming in. Please feel free to drop more questions in. Wherever you're streaming, the people that are the band is following the streams on our social media, so they'll transfer questions here. But if you're in Zoom, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Feel free to ask questions. I really want, I've got a couple of videos I want to show folks of your music. And let's start with, why don't you tell us about the one you just finished, actually?
Sure. So one of the bands that has been a huge influence, and you know, well, not just on me, but I guess, you know, one of the best bands ever, I guess, one of the most influential bands ever were the Beatles. And so, you know, I knew that the Beatles had come and spent some time in India in the late 60s when they were invited by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who had an ashram near a place called Rishikesh, where he practiced and taught transcendental meditation. So the Beatles ended up in Rishikesh and spent some time there and wrote, you know, what is one of my favorite Beatles albums, the White Album. So for a long time, you know, after the Maharishi had left the place, it sort of it fell to you know, it was sort of crumbling, and nobody really knew, or you know, there wasn't a whole lot of maintenance that happened. But of late, about 7 or 8 years ago, I think the government of India realized that they were sitting on a potential tourist haven. And so, you know, they had it done up. And when I say they had it done up, they didn't repair the ruins. So the ruins are there as, you know, as they are. But they had, you know, they cleaned up the place, you know, cleaned up the sort of, the forest had overgrown the place. So they cleaned it up. And they had this fantastic, or a couple of fantastic mural artists come in and sort of paint stuff on the walls that depicted the time that the Beatles spent there. So we went and visited this place in October last year. And my son also, who's a, you know, who's a great guitar player, is also heavily into the Beatles. So, you know, it was really a wonderful experience for us. And literally, you know, on the flight back, on the plane back to Dubai, you know, I started thinking about this song. And I wrote the words and you know, put this to music last year. And I've been sort of toying with, been working on it, and eventually finally got it to a point where I was happy with the production. I was helped along the way by, you know, some friends of mine that helped to master and produce it. And so, yeah, the song is called Rishikesh. And it's about, you know, it's about Rishikesh, how it's, you know, it's spirituality, its association with the Beatles.
And the video, this song has been going through my head the past couple of days. The video is really well done, Vijit, and there's footage and pictures from your family while you were there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that adds a real charm to it that I just love here. I'm going to rewind it here because I was listening to it right before we started.
Less travel, I once did embark to the call of the river and the trill of a lark. Like 4 pilgrims before me, I did seek out a place, a mystical land they call Rishikesh. It was here the Maharishi did build his abode, where God, men, and mortals did lighten their load. Far from the glare of adulation so bright, it was here they did conceive an album so white. Gateway to the heavens, Rishikesh. Your emerald waters, your grace, where many a sinner opts out of the race to dance with the divine in a cosmic embrace, where the errant and sages atone for their sins to the rhythm of the river and the songs of jinns, where poets and pilgrims in penance do chant, beseech the Creator, salvation to grant, to enter the heavens without strife, and transcend the cycle of life. Heavens, Rishikesh, your emerald waters, your grace, where many a sinner opts out of the race to dance with the divine in a cosmic embrace.
So good, Vijit.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
So you were telling me you sent me a version of this I got probably 6 weeks ago or something, and you were telling me yesterday that you met with was it a producer? Somebody mastered it, and you spoke to somebody and they gave you some advice on the song.
But there are many people, Ben, that sort of helped me along the way. Initially, there was a friend of mine, Yasser Habib, who's a fantastic Emirati musician himself, has a beautiful studio set up at his home. And so we went in there, and he helped me to put together the first cut, which was more than 4.5 minutes long. And along the way, there was this other guy, an English guy, Andrew Kay. I don't know if Andrew's on this session. But Andrew suggested that I cut it down if I wanted it to get radio play at any point in time. So then he sort of helped me cut it down, take out a few of the choruses. And then eventually I sent it to this friend of mine who's just a fantastic musician and a great bass player, Paul Joseph in India. And he and a friend of his, then, like I said, sprinkled some magic dust on it by putting together a very nice bass track. And a lead guitar, track, and then they had it mastered, and so this is the end version of all of that effort, which took about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
To finally get it to a point where I was comfortable sort of releasing it publicly.
Well, it sounds fantastic. And are you going to start playing it with your band?
Yeah, we've already started to play it, and again, Ben, I just want to plug in here that I'm very, very fortunate to play with some, absolutely astounding musicians in Dubai. And if you guys are on the show, Ishan, Arun, Rajesh, Rahul, love you guys, man. And they just help bring out the best, best in all of us. I think the collective is so much more than the individual parts.
Yeah, I mean,
Roots.
Yeah, we're gonna play a video of Roots live here in a bit, and I know your sentiment about that. Like your musicians that you play with are your brothers, they are your sisters, they make you whole, especially as a musician. So that's something that definitely resonates with me. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to have a band in Dubai, what the scene is like,
So it's, we've had this band, this particular ensemble has been together for, or most of us have been together for the better part of about 8 years. And prior to that, I had another band, again, a band called the Desert Ramblers, and I know one of my, my ex-compatriots in the Ramblers is on this session. So Chelly, good to have you on the show. And we started back in 2007, and at that point, the scene was just about beginning to open up. Back then, they were quite stringent or quite strict about, what you could do in a public place or a commercial establishment. So if your visa said bank manager, then you were a bank manager. You were not a musician, So, but eventually they opened that up a little bit, and they allowed establishments, bars and clubs and things like that, to get permissions for the night for amateur bands like us to come in and play. And that led to a burgeoning of the scene, and we met lots of people through that. And the sort of current setup of Roots, I met through the music scene in Dubai. So it's still pretty active. Unfortunately, with what's going on now, as you could probably imagine, Ben, it's quite sad for musicians here. But hopefully we'll come through this.
Yeah, I want to get to that too, about what's currently going on. I'm curious, when you play at a club in Dubai, do they sell alcohol?
Yes, they do. So it's a very, very liberal place, Dubai. It's very cosmopolitan. You need to have a drinking permit. And in some it's also known as a drinking license. So I have a funny story where actually, in wearing my banking hat, I was in South Korea one time. We were financing a ship, so we went to take delivery, a ceremonial delivery of the ship, and the senior vice president from Hyundai Heavy Industries, he was asking. He said, "Oh, so do you can you drink in Dubai?" So I said, "Well, you need a drinking license." So he said, "Oh, so is that kind of like a driving license? So do you have to pass a test, a drinking test, to get a drinking license?" But not quite like that. But yes, you need a permit to be able to buy alcohol and ostensibly to drink. But yes, you can get, there are many, many bars and many, many nightclubs and pubs that sell alcohol.
How do you get a license to drink? We won't dwell on this anymore. I just think it's fascinating.
Well, your sponsor, the company that you work for, would have to endorse your application to get a permit. It's fairly easy. So as long as your sponsor is happy with you, thinks you're a responsible drinker, you get one.
Oh, we'll leave that. We'll leave it at that. I can't imagine. So I want to play a video here of your band performing in Dubai. Can you give us a little background about this?
So this was a show that we did at a place called at Alco's, and they have an arts festival. It's a very nice arty kind of place set up in the middle of an industrial area, in fact. So, warehouses converted into, a nice sort of auditorium for music, if you will. And lots of nice little, shops and things around. So we were asked to play as part of that art festival. So we did probably a gig of about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I think the song that you're going to play is probably one by one of my favorite bands, The Band. And this is called The Wait.
Pulling the eyes around, lost feeling about 8:30. Just need some place where I can lay my head. Hey, mister, can you tell me where I might find a bed? Just screamed and shook my head. No one saw me say, take the load off Fanny, take a load for free, take a load off Fanny. You put the load right on me.
Picked up my bag, went looking for a place to hide. When I saw old Common and the devil walking side by side, said, "Hey now, Common, come on, won't you go downtown?" Said, "Well, I've got to go, but my friend can stick around."
Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free, take a load off Fanny. You put the load right on me.
Well, go down, Moses, there ain't nothing that you can say, 'cause it's just all Luke, and Luke's waiting on the judgment day. Said, "Now Luke, my friend, what about young Anna Lee?" Said, "Do me a favor, Crazy Chester followed me as he caught me in the fall. Said, I will fix you right if you take back my door. Said, wait a minute, Chester, no, I'm a peaceful man. He said, that's okay, boy, won't you feed me? Feed it when you can.
Take a load of Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load of Fanny. You put the load right on me.
Attach your cannonball now to take me on down the line. 'Cause my bag is sinking low, and I do believe it's time. Get back to Miss Annie, you know she's the only one who sent me here with her regards for everyone.
Take a load of Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load of Fanny. You put the load right on me.
Vijit, it's fascinating to all of us that you're interested in American music, but there's more to you than that. Can you tell us that your connection to traditional music from India, and I know that's where you started, give us some more information about that, and I believe you have an instrument there that is definitely not American.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I learned Hindustani classical music in school in India, and I picked up an instrument called the sarod, which is not the easiest instrument to play. But I was very lucky to have the guy who taught me. He was one of the finest sarod players in India. And when I told him that I wanted to learn it, he said, and I was all of 11, I think, at the time. So he said, look, I'll teach you, but you have to give me your commitment that you would take it seriously. And so, I guess I did take it somewhat seriously and learned this instrument. It's a fascinating instrument. And this particular instrument that I have here is was built in 1979. And I have had no work done on it other than change the strings. And I'll play a little bit. I'm very rusty on the sarod, but I'll play a little bit for you here, and so that people get a sense of what it looks like and sounds like. And the conflict with playing the guitar and the sarod intermittently is that the sarod is actually played on the fingernails. Whereas for guitar you typically need to have, as you would know, short fingernails, otherwise they interfere with your playing. But sorry. a
Is
sarod.
that? It looks like chrome on the neck.
So the fretboard, well, there's no frets.
Right.
So the board is it's a metal. It's a sheet of metal.
Huh.
This is goat skin that covers this, and that's where it gets its amplification. Because it's metal and there are no frets, you have to play on the fingernails. If I was to play on my fingertips, you won't hear the sound.
Right.
It's muffled.
Beautiful. Yeah. What's the ball behind the headstock?
So that's more sort of ornamentation and just helps balance the instrument when you're playing it. It doesn't actually do much for the sound. But the interesting thing is this instrument actually has 23 strings on it. So you play the top 4 strings primarily. They have what are called chinkari strings. So these are sort of more percussive.
Right.
And then there are about 15 strings at the bottom, which are resonant, there for resonance. And kind of like the instrument that Farid was playing the other day on your show.
Right.
That kind, I haven't actually tuned all of them up to what I'm playing now.
Okay.
But when you do, then it gives it a lovely resonance and just makes the sound even nicer.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember the Rabab having something similar on it, right?
Yes. So the Rabab is actually the predecessor of the Sarod.
Okay.
And the Rabab came across to India, when the Afghani traders and came across into India. And then over a period of time, the Rabab evolved into the Sarod. Of course, they still play the Rabab, and particularly in Pakistan, Afghanistan, it's still very popular.
Yeah.
But the Sarod then became sort of one of the primary instruments in Hindustani classical music.
That's cool. In the Patreon for this episode, we'll drop some other examples of people playing both that and the Rabab, because we collaborated with a Rabab player a few years ago in Pakistan.
That was wonderful.
Yeah, he was incredible. We get to meet so many amazing people like yourself. I feel very, very fortunate. I have some great questions here. I want to get to them,
Sure.
but I also want to ask you what's going on in Dubai. What's it like in Dubai in relation to COVID, and how you're dealing with it and your family's dealing with it?
Sure. So, like everywhere else, we're also pretty much in lockdown mode. Essential services are still allowed to operate, and people are allowed to move around, for essential services. If you need to go pick up, goods, groceries and things like that, you need to get a permit and then you're allowed out. But it's pretty much in lockdown mode. Now, Dubai being a transient place, you would expect that this disease would spread. But the good thing is that they obviously have a very, very solid medical infrastructure, and so whilst there are a number of cases of infection, the actual death rate is very low.
Mm-hmm.
So they're testing extensively. They've got drive-through testing centers that you can go to now. But it's impacted everybody's life like everywhere else as well. And we don't know how long this is going to take. We will remain in lockdown for, I think, till the end of the month at least, and then we'll see.
How are you holding up personally?
Good. I now, for my day job, I do some financial consulting, so that, yes, that is it's taken a bit of a hit. Because it's something that's based on meeting people, going out meeting clients and things like that. It's still it's not completely dead, but yes, like everything else, it's a little more difficult, but we're managing. I think everyone's managing, everyone's figuring out ways to do things online. Zoom, this is a great facility, and people use it extensively.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think people are adaptable. And we manage.
Yeah, I appreciate your buoyancy on that. That's the right attitude to be taking. I think we all have our ups and downs throughout this, and doing this is one of my big ups. So I really appreciate you being a part of it. I want to get to some of these great questions here.
Sure.
Drew Schmidt, who I believe said he was in Paris, He said, Vijit, do you see any similarities between traditional American bluegrass and folk music and instruments with traditional types of Indian music and musical instruments?
That's a great question, and I know Ben, we talked about this when you had Farid on your show as well.
Reed Hawk, fabulous jazz guitar player.
Just outstanding.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Amazing. And I asked him the question as to whether he had how big of an influence was Indian classical music on what he did, and the thing to sort of know is that they're very different forms of music. So in Indian classical music, you play a different rags within a defined scale. So whether that's a pentatonic scale or a septatonic scale. And so you play within, the note combinations and the notes, the minors and majors is defined in that scale. So we don't have chord music per se, as you do in Western music. So very different forms of music, and there have been lots of people that have fused the two styles together and come out with very interesting stuff. Zakir Hussain has been John McLaughlin. I mean, these guys with Shakti have done fabulous work. But yes, I think they are very distinct forms of music, and so I'm a big fan of Hindustani classical music. I've played it, I've studied it, and it's very immersive. When you start listening to a piece, you can the maestros will play a particular piece in a rag for 4 hours at a stretch. And we used to have this wonderful place where I grew up called Dover Lane. Again, I went there with my mother first, and these guys would play all night. So you'd literally, it was an open air thing. You'd take your blankets and your quilts, and you'd kind of settle down for the night. And these guys would really dig deep into the rag. So in a sense, I know we had this conversation with Farid, and he said, look, the purists kind of, very restrictive. I do feel that, yes, the purists will sort of have their point of view, but even within that form of music, there's so much scope for improvisation. It's incredible.
Yeah. I love the thought of
the question. I don't know whether that.
Yeah, you did. I love the thought of you going to, this was in Calcutta with the musicians who played all night.
Yes.
Place called
Dover Lane.
Your mom took you?
Yeah, she's extremely has a beautiful voice herself, and she's extremely interested in in Indian classical music. Was part of a lot of these societies where you'd get to see the greats, play in people's living rooms, as it were. So that was a big influence.
That's cool. Joseph Underdown asks, have you ever played with or seen Zahir Hussain, the percussionist that played with Mickey Hart?
I have seen Zakir play many times, and he's fantastic. He's such an icon, such an international icon. But one story that comes to mind in particular, I saw him play with a guy that is the foremost player of something called the santoor, which is kind of almost like a harp in a sense. It's it's a 100-string instrument. And Zakir was playing with Shiv Kumar Sharma, this guy who plays the santoor in the south. And Zakir is known all over India. Shiv Kumar Sharma was better known in the north. And so people after a while, sort of, when anytime Zakir took a little bit of an, sort of improv, the crowd would go wild. And eventually Zakir just stopped. He stopped Shiv Kumar and he said, listen, you need to listen to Panditji. I'm just the accompanist here. And after that, he just played straight tabla. He refused to do anything out of the ordinary because he wanted people to listen. So that's, with him, he's just so selfless and so confident in himself that, but fabulous
guy. Wamagunda Mwangi from Nairobi asked, what's your recording / creative process? I know that's a huge question, but maybe you could take a small piece of it or something.
So I don't know whether I have a recording or a creative process at all. I've started writing my own music last year, and I've written about 4 or 5, well, a little before that, a couple of years ago. So I've written about 4 or 5 songs, and all I do is, I've sort of taught myself how to try and make it sound a little better on a DAW. So, just learning as I go along, in terms of separation through equalization, through depth and breadth if you look at sort of the equalization, reverb, and so on. And learning every day. I use a PreSonus Studio 1.3, and I've got these mics set up. I'm learning more and more about playing MIDI instruments and playing a bass track or playing a drum track online. So it's using my time, hopefully productively.
Yeah. My dad asks, how does a guy from India end up in Muskingum?
That's a fabulous question, actually. Muskingum was somebody from the school that I went to, back in the 70s, discovered Muskingum, right in the middle of New Concord, Ohio. And so he ended up going there and liked the place, and they liked him. And so they had, people going in dribs and drabs thereafter, to the point where the college was so happy with people coming out of that school that they offered. I was the first guy to get a full tuition scholarship to go to Muskingum. Now, of course, my brother also went on a scholarship before me. He's 2 years older than me. His name is Ranjit. So when I landed up in New Concord, Ohio, on campus for the first time, somebody yelled out and said, hey, Ranjit, So I said, no, I'm not Ranjit. So he said, you're not? You're little Ranjit then, So, so I guess, he and I were the first Sikhs that probably they had ever encountered in New Concord, Ohio. But I mean, it was really, I just had a wonderful time. People were so warm and so hospitable. We were just welcomed into our friends' houses, and
that's cool.
An incredible time.
That's good to hear. I want to ask a couple more questions here, but I also want you to finish with a song. We have several requests here for a Grateful Dead song, not surprisingly.
Okay.
But there was a good question here from our friend John Zielinski. Do you see the improvisational aspects of Hindustani classical music affecting your interest in the Dead and bluegrass?
So, I think there's all of those forms of music are replete with improvisation. Just listen to the Hen House Prowlers guys. I mean, they're one of the best bluegrass bands I've ever heard. And the kind of improvisation, the kind of licks that they take just blows my mind. And in particular, Ben, I must say, you guys, your vocal harmonies are just so tight. It would be like peeling an onion. Layer by layer to sort of peel those harmonies away. So yes, I do see similarities and yet differences. As I said, the basis, the foundations of those types of music are different, but improvisation is a strong underlying theme in all of them, and the Dead in particular as well.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think, the Dead, so many people like the Dead is because, nobody says, have you heard Jack Straw, Have you heard the 1978 July, Carnegie Hall version of Jack Straw? That's the question. So every Jack Straw is different. Every Sugar Magnolia is different, and that's the beauty of the Dead.
Yeah, I remember I forget the exact words you used, but I think you actually helped me appreciate the Dead more after our first big conversation, because I never thought about it that way. And the improvisational nature of their music means that sometimes you go to see a show and it's not that amazing because, really.
Absolutely. I think, and Jerry was the first to admit it. He said 5 nights out of 6, we really sucked. But that 6th night, it all sort of came together, magically. So I guess they played so often that yes, it could get, I can imagine it would get tedious at some point, but also because they had that latitude of just adoring fans that, would lap up whatever they put out there. They had that leeway and that latitude and that freedom to improvise, and that sort of created magic on certain nights. Other nights, yes, it was terrible.
Not so much. Hey, well, why don't you grab your guitar while I go through our kind of closing spiel here. Just as a reminder, folks, my name's Ben with the Hen House Prowlers. We have a nonprofit organization called Bluegrass Ambassadors, which is, and what you're watching right now is what we're doing during lockdown, which is kind of hopefully bringing some of the educational work we do in the States and in schools and abroad online so we can continue to do the work that we love doing as a band. So every week we're going to have a new guest. This week is obviously Vijit, right in front of you, is fabulous musician from Dubai. Next week is Celia from Della May, one of the best bluegrass bands in the country. And the week after that is Jake Blount, who's a quickly rising star. He plays fiddle and banjo, and he's kind of bringing the African-American influences back into old time and folk music and bluegrass. Everybody in this trio right here of artists that we're doing over these 3 weeks are people that have really inspired me recently. And so I'm really excited to be having a chance to talk to them. If you want to help us out, we are paying the musicians. We are paying for services to make this get out there as best as possible. And we're continuing to do the work that Bluegrass Ambassadors does. You can either PayPal a donation to paypal.me/bluegrassambassadors, or you can also go to our website, bluegrassambassadors.org, or you can go to our Patreon and get bonus content from these artists and make a monthly donation that gets you access to kind of behind the scenes stuff. So check that out. Tomorrow's episode is just for kids. The guys are going to drop links to it. You should bring your kids. Tell your friends that are at home homeschooling with their kids. We're really trying to do 2 episodes where one is like this one that gets pretty nerdy about music, and then one that is a lot more lighthearted and fun and educational. I can't wait to show the kids tomorrow where you're from originally, where you live now, these instruments that are going to blow their minds, play them some songs that they're going to love. You're going to be so perfect for this, Vijit. Vijit, where can people find your music online?
So we have a Facebook page for Roots. It's called Roots-the Band. Mm-hmm. I'm also on Facebook, and it's you just search for Vijit Malik and you'll find me. We're across social media. I'm not so good with the social media piece, but one of the younger guys in the band, he's got us. So I can put a link up to all of our social media sites, and we also have a YouTube channel where you can check out some of our live videos.
All right, so I'm going to publish this because we had trouble with streaming. I'm going to publish this on all of our pages, and I'll make sure to link to all those as well. But don't hesitate to find him on Facebook, Vijit Malik. It's spelled exactly how it sounds, Vijitmalik. And I got that right, didn't I?
You did.
Nice. So I don't want to end this, but we're going to. Will you take us out with a song? Sure. And then we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for being such an incredible guest.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Ben. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I lit out from Reno. I was trailed by 20 hounds. Didn't get to sleep that night till the morning came around. Set out running, but I take my time. A friend at the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just not get some sleep tonight. Ran into the devil, baby, loaned me 20 bills. Spent the night in Utah in a cave up in the hills. Set out running, but I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. Ran down to the levee, but the devil caught me there. He took my $20 bills and he vanished in the air. Set out running, but I take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. I've got 2 reasons why I cried away each lonely night. First one's named Sweet Anne Marie, and she's my heart's delight. Second one is prison, baby. Sheriff's on my trail. And if he catches up to me, and I'll spend my life in jail. Got a wife in Chino, babe, and one in Cherokee.
First one says she's got my chocolate, but it don't look like me. Said out running, better take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight. Got two reasons why I cried away each lonely night. The first one's named Sweet Anne Marie, and she's my heart's delight. Second one is prison baby, the sheriff's on my track. And if he catches up to me, you know I'll spend my life in jail. Got a wife in Chino, babe, and one in Cherokee. First one says she's got my child, but it don't look like me. Said out running, better take my time. A friend of the devil is a friend of mine. If I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight.
Thank you so much, Vijit.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you tomorrow at 11 a.m. for the kids episode.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Me too, man. Thanks.
Thank you.